The Fruitful Entrepreneurs podcast aims to increase the visibility of female leaders in business, inspire a limitless mindset to build your own blooming brand, and leave a positive impact with a purpose-driven business. Hi, and welcome to the Fruitful Founder podcast. I'm your host, Shelley Tilbrook, and today I'm joined by the co-founder of the Co-Pilot crew, Candice DeVille. Candice works with ambitious business leaders to build meaningful brands and better connection with their customer through strategic analysis, design, data, and marketing communication. She has 20 years experience in marketing, business growth advisory and strategy, and has been an entrepreneur from a very young age. She also mentors women-led businesses and entrepreneurs through RMIT, Startup Bootcamp and MAP, to provide access to high-level guidance and strategy support. So welcome, Candice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Shelley.
Wonderful. One of the reasons I was really excited about interviewing you on this Female Founder series was your drive to use marketing as a force for positive change, something that I'm very passionate about too. But before we dive into that, let's just start from the beginning, early on in your career and how you ended up being a business owner.
Okay. I think in some ways I was really fortunate because I came from a family of entrepreneurs or people that ran their own businesses. So I hadn't really considered that there was going to be another way for me. And I learned very quickly, in my first couple of jobs that being an employee wasn't really for me. In part because I'm very much an ideas person and I tend to get bored very, very quickly. I'm not great at taking instruction.
Not alone there.
Yeah. So for a few years, I started off working in marketing and PR, particularly working with an international aid organisation. And that was how I discovered that I had a bit of a talent for marketing, and then moved into working for some other much larger commercial organisations, and very quickly realised that some of the angles of working in that industry weren't so ethical and it didn't sit very well with me. And from that point, I decided I really wanted to pursue doing both my own thing and doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely relate to that. I suppose always sort of picked career paths that have led me to things that I truly believe in that are creating good in this world, because it is one of those things when you have the skill, you can market anything, but to market something that's actually helpful for others and helpful for the environment and so forth is really what I suppose drew me to interview you today. So tell us about your company now, what it does, who you serve, how you help them. Yeah, I'd love to sort of understand exactly where you fit.
Sure. Well, the whole concept for Co-Pilot Crew came about when I met my co-founder, who we met at a speaking engagement here in Australia. He was brought over from the States to speak, and I was speaking on another topic. And we got talking about just how difficult marketing is for a lot of small businesses here when they start working in the agency landscape and, hiring people to help them with their SEO or this or that, but it's not necessarily their forte and they don't understand all of the things that are there. Just how quickly a lot of them were being fleeced or overcharged and the risks involved. And as a female founder, particularly, you've got a lot that you're putting on the line. You've got your kids, you've got your house, you've got all of these things. I was seeing what was happening to friends of mine who had started small businesses and had gone off to agencies and were just losing money hand over fist. And I thought that there has to be a better way. There has to be somewhere that, is a conduit between the business owner and the agency service, where you're truly working with someone who not just does the marketing for you and does the things, but can really help guide you in making the right decisions and treats your business success like their own business success. And that's where the concept of the co-pilot came from. And everything for our brand is that we work hand in hand with the business owner, so that, if they come to us and send us an email at 3:00 in the morning saying, hey, I've got this great idea, why don't we do this? We become almost like a mentor in some ways to say, okay, let's have a look at the data. What is this actually telling us? where is a good way to invest this or that for the business, rather than being locked into what many of them found, which was, we're just going to spend this money on these channels and we don't know if this is going to work. So being more channel agnostic and really looking at their businesses from what they want to achieve from a lifestyle standpoint and what they're risking versus how much money can we make as quickly as possible. So that's the co-pilot.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you're I suppose the name says it all, you're co-piloting, helping them guide their business on their particular growth journey, whatever their objectives might be. So,
that's right. Yeah. And that's where we've ended up sort of being an unusual hybrid between sort of a consulting firm and a marketing agency, whereby we look at a lot of the strategy and help people work out what their plan is, give them a bit of a blueprint, but then also can do the execution side of that as well, so they're not left floundering. And that's proven to be a really great model because it allows that flexibility, but it's also very much based in trust for what is happening with their business and being able to grow with them.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you said, you're an entrepreneur at heart. You have just recently created a new project, I believe, or a new company, or tell us about that.
We actually just quietly soft launched a new sister company about 1 month ago. So there's a lot happening in that space, which is AI Copilot. And AI Copilot is designed to work with small to medium businesses, particularly here in Australia, helping them navigate how they can bring AI into their business. So particularly looking at things like augmenting the workforce and really helping to build those skills through training and workshops and education, as well as helping businesses find some of the best opportunities to do what they can with custom AI in the business. But the goal is really to help people understand and improve what they can do, rather than feeling like, okay, this is necessarily going to take my job. That's not the goal. The goal is to, how do we bring that human element and augment that with AI to lift all of the boats, and really help people be able to accelerate their careers and their knowledge in such a fast moving space, because I think there's a lot of concern around that right now.
Yeah, fantastic. So going back to, I suppose, starting your business, to the journey that's taken you on to here at this point, everyone expects it's going to be a straight line, but it probably isn't for anyone. So just tell us a little bit about that journey, or any challenges that you had along the way, what it was like starting up. Love to hear.
I would say that starting a business is very much like having children. People think it's going to be a great idea, they're like picking out the baby clothes, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, and then you do it and everyone says, no one ever told me it was like this. So that's probably the best analogy I can give you. I'm sure there's a number of your listeners who will understand that feeling. And when you first start out, you have this really romantic idea of what that's going to be like. And the journey is never that straight line. There is a lot of twists and turns. But I think much like with the growth of children, you get to these points where it's really hard and you struggle through it. And then you think, yeah, I've got this. And then something changes. And then suddenly you're off kilter and you go, oh, not really sure what I'm doing here. Got to readjust. Some of the biggest challenges I've really found in this is both keeping that mental balance of, how do you deal with the pressure of having a business where you don't necessarily know what the cash flow is going to look like, as opposed to being an employee where you have a regular paycheck. You have to have a much higher tolerance for risk. And you need to understand what that is for you, because that's different for everybody. And then there's also the element of how much you love what you do. And this is a very, very tricky part, because most, particularly women in business, tend to start their business based on a passion rather than necessarily what is a good market fit. And that's where we often see, even with clients, just running into problems, because if you are in love with what you do, you don't want anyone to tell you that your baby is ugly.
Yeah.
And sometimes the baby is ugly, you know, or the product or something that you're working with just doesn't work, even if you completely love it. And so being able to work through that emotional struggle of what is really working, what is a really good fit. And, you know, like my writing teacher used to say, you have to learn to kill your darlings. You know, the lines that you love in your stories sometimes just have to go. And that's one of the hardest things to learn, is just to let go the things that you may love but aren't a good fit for the business. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably the number one.
Yeah, and I'd say, like you say, when people are following their passion, they're often designing it for themselves, as opposed to really thinking about their target market and what they need and want, and creating everything around it to solve their problem. And so that's, yeah, I love the baby analogy though. It's quite true.
Yeah, it really is. And we see that so often, you know, when we're talking to people and we ask the questions around, well, did you do the market research? And they say, yeah, I asked my mom, I asked my sister, I asked my cousin. It's like, that's talking to an audience who already love you. The best thing to do is go talk to people that don't like you and go and see what they're going to say about this, or actually, you know, employ a market research company to do these sorts of things. And that does really help, because it can be quite confronting. And there's a large personal journey that you go on through this at the beginning, of being able to make those separations and understand that if someone criticizes your business or your product, that it's not a criticism of you as a person. And that can be a really tough one.
Yeah, I think that's for many, it's about business, it's not about you, is a great separation, because people are, you know, do get very attached to their business in that early infancy stage of, you know, they might be a solo entrepreneur and they've done everything. They've done the marketing, they've done the logo, they've done, you know, the website, and every element has come from them. Whereas, yeah, there are times where bringing in the experts can really, you know, skyrocket that growth and take it on the right trajectory. Yeah.
And it is hard for all of us, because we put so much of ourselves into it. And even for myself, you know, working in the marketing business, there is that temptation to still do everything yourself, because you have that creative brain. And one of the big challenges for me, and it still remains a challenge, is being able to delegate, particularly things that I personally love doing or that I'm really passionate about. And being able to delegate that to other people in the team who are also really creative and may have a completely different perspective than I have on this, and at least trying to work together to reach an outcome that is still better than what I do alone.
Well, it's like, I suppose I'd find it very easy to delegate all the finance and admin side of it, because I don't enjoy that. And even things like, you know, managing your own social media, when you're the business owner, consistency is really important. And so sometimes, even though you're good at that stuff or you can do that stuff, sometimes it is best to delegate some of those tasks. So
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, early on in your career, you did a lot of charity work and you're involved in, you know, many interesting things overseas. I'd love to hear a bit about those stories and how they shaped, I suppose, your values and what drove you into, I suppose, this purpose-driven side of marketing.
It really started right at the beginning, when I first started working in marketing, which was the late 90s. And I was a marketing assistant for an international aid organisation. And one of my big responsibilities was marketing a child sponsorship program. But, you know, I was young and I had never seen a lot of these things firsthand. So when I was working on things like, you know, marketing copy or, you know, radio ads or whatever it was, it felt to me that it was kind of hollow, that I couldn't necessarily really connect with the pain that these people were experiencing. And so I decided that I would take a bit of time and go and work in this program. So I packed up my stuff and I went over to China, and this particular program was a program working in an orphanage in the mountains in rural China. So no cities, no nothing, just very, very bare bones. And that was a huge eye-opener for me. You know, you think you understand what poverty might be or what hard situations might be, but actually living in that situation with the kids was fascinating. particularly from the point of view of how they viewed the world and their own attitudes and how positive they were and how warm and friendly and all of these things. So I went and lived and worked in China for a while doing that. I didn't speak the language at all at that time either. So I was just really naive, packed my bag and went, yeah, sure, I'll do this. Yeah. But what was fascinating is it just gave me such an insight into the incredible difference that some of the work that was happening in these spaces was making to these kids' lives. And like, to give you an example, some of these kids, they're like 7, 8 years old. And this particular area, the challenge that they were facing is getting water because the mountains were made of limestone and the water would go through. So we were working with an engineering company to actually build a lined dam that would keep the water. Because every single day before these kids went to school, 7 and 8 years old, they'd have to walk 2 or 3 kilometers in underground tunnels to go and get enough water to bring it back for the family for the day, and then try and go to school as well. And these are mountains, so it was a lot. And you see that and you just think this is normal for them. They're like, this is what we've got to do. And I couldn't imagine seeing 6, 7-year-olds doing this every day here and understanding that what difference could be made by just these small amounts of money here in Australia to a really important project like that. And the knock-on effect was huge. And this is what gave me the real passion for working with female founders, was that both boys and girls would be doing this. Whereas if time was freed up, the boys were the priority, that the boys would go to school. Whereas through some of these projects, the girls were then able to go to school as well and start to learn. So I was able to see this hands-on. And then when I came back to Australia, I just thought, this is the kind of thing I want to be involved in. I want to be able to use the talents that I have in marketing to work with companies that want to leave the world better than they found it. And it doesn't have to be charities. It doesn't have to be, sustainable businesses, but essentially, rather than just do no harm, it's actively do good. These are the people that we work with.
Yeah, I love that. I think, that having that experience early on clearly has shaped a lot of what you're focusing on now. But what an incredible experience. That's so eye-opening for you. Yeah, amazing. I suppose looking back on the journey of growing your business, were there things that you look back on now and go, I wish I could have told myself that wasn't a good idea? Or were there times where you've, you could have made an expensive mistake, or you could have just learned a really great lesson? Is there anything that springs to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. The most expensive mistake is one that I see people make all the time, and it is very easy to make. And that's making hiring decisions based on personality fit and meeting people and just going, oh, I really like you. This really clicks. This is going to be great. And sometimes just overlooking, skill shortages or whatever it might be, and thinking, I'm going to work with this person. I'm going to train them.
Yeah.
And there is a line where I wish I'd sort of said to myself, I'll give myself like 90 days and have a really clear roadmap in place that if together we don't get there at this time, then it really isn't the right fit. But what I would tend to do, because I make very strong connections with people and you're like, oh, I really like you. I love working with you. I want to train you. Then I would tend to overinvest in people who weren't necessarily right for the role. And it wasn't just expensive in as much as they weren't able to do the work that needed to be done, but it took me away from a lot of what I needed to be doing because I was doing way more training than I should be.
Yeah.
So that's been probably the single most expensive mistake. And really understanding that, yes, you can hire for attitude and personality, but that skill set has to be there, and you need to give yourself very, very clear progress goals and put a line in the sand and understand, like we said before, the business and personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think building a team is probably one of the biggest challenges I've faced, and certainly for most people, that's where things can start to lose control or start to lose that consistency in the business. And so, the onboarding process, the hiring process, all of that, and managing performance becomes really important. So I think that is a really valuable lesson for everyone. Would you say that you've faced any particular roadblocks in growth, or would you pinpoint a time where you went, we tried this and then it took off? Is there either the roadblock or the real sort of milestone to get the growth? Did you sort of face one of those?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shelley. I think for a lot of businesses, the roadblocks are quite different, and it depends on what service you're offering, whether it is a service type business or a product type business. For us, I think the roadblock is having the clarity around things like profitability, to know when is the milestone that you feel personally comfortable with the next phase of growth. And for a lot of small businesses, there's a few years usually before you're even profitable. And then once you become profitable, it's a great feeling. Like, this is fantastic. I can pay myself. Okay, that's nice. But at what point are you then going to say, this is where I'm going to cap that for comfort, and now I can grow from here? And that is different for everybody, but understanding what that is really clearly, and having built yourself enough of a safety net to know when is the time to reinvest in new products or marketing or whatever that might be, rather than having the roadblock of your own profitability.
Absolutely. Even I suppose looking at those, I suppose for some people it's a leap of faith, for some it's taking the courage, but that investment back into, could be yourself or it could be into the business. Did you have one of those moments where you were like, oh, will this work? But you just went with courage and commitment and went straight in?
I do that a lot. I probably say at least once a month on something. Particularly because in the space that we're in, it changes all the time. And so one of the things that underpins the work in both Copilot Crew and in AI Copilot is experimentation. That you have to be prepared to experiment with things that you really don't know what the outcome's going to be. The more skilled and trained you are, then you can make more educated guesses about things and you can have data, but you don't know 100%. And getting comfortable with that mindset of experimentation and understanding, how long you should run it for, trying to put some sort of framework in place can really help you to make some of those scarier decisions. If you understand, okay, and you look at it scientifically, these are the parameters of what I'm going to experiment with this month. This is how long I'm going to run it for. This is what I'm prepared to invest in terms of financially or time or staff or whatever it might be. Like, really weigh that up and quantify it so that you feel like you're much more in control of the risk part of that experiment, so that you can go forward and understand whether it was a success or not. What is your expected outcome? And then really look at that and measure that once you've taken the risk, so that you can determine what you learned from it. I don't believe that there's ever complete failures in these things, because we always learn something. But quite often when businesses do take these risks and they're like, oh, I'm just going to suck it up and do it, they haven't really thought about, well, what are some of the key outcomes here, so that even if I don't reach this ultimate goal that I've wanted, maybe I've learned these other things along the way, or I've got this valuable data to prove my theory on these sorts of things. So my advice on that is just to take that separation step, be a little bit more scientific about what you're doing, and then whatever the outcome is, you'll have better information and you'll learn something from it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. Do you follow a particular mantra or business philosophy yourself? Is there something that you always come back to as a grounding thing for making decisions, or just in terms of the values that you have? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, good question. Other than the ethics that we were talking about before, there's probably a couple. On the personal side, when you do things, I've always got that just get stuff done mantra, where particularly if you've got a to-do list, you have got to do the thing. And if things keep going over to the next week, then I set aside time to do things that are on the bottom of the list, because otherwise they'll always stay on the bottom of the list. So that is one of them. But the biggest one by far across all my businesses, all my life, everything, is never stop learning. Learning for me is my number one goal in life, that the more you learn, the more ability that you have to tap into your unrealized potential. And we have so much potential that we just aren't connecting because we have that missing gap of knowledge or skills. And there's never been a better time in history to learn whatever it is you want to, and to learn it for free with the access that we have to people and tutorials and all of these things, to just take that time and say, all right, well, maybe I'm not going to watch, Married at First Sight or whatever it might be that people are watching. And instead, I'm going to commit to learning this thing that I've always wanted to know. For me, it's things like languages. I study languages. I find that's completely fascinating. But it could be something else. I'm not naturally inclined to math. So because I know that it feels painful, I will make myself go and learn something about that, because it gives me not only the knowledge, but it gives me that satisfaction of going, haha, I nailed that. I can do that now. And if I can do that, then I can do this other hard thing that's been waiting on my to-do list.
Yeah, amazing. I always say the phrase, the more you learn, the more you earn, becoming that real expert. But it's not only that, it's, I suppose, moving with the time. So my next question really is around what your business looked like when it started to what it is now. Has that really evolved a lot, or is it still fairly consistent with where you started out?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved quite a bit. We found that initially we were very much on the consulting model only, and then it evolved to be consulting and services. And we took a very straightforward approach of like, this is the way that we do it because this is the way it works. But what we found was that it doesn't necessarily work for everyone that fits our ideal client profile, depending on where they are in their business, but also in their life. And some of them would come to us and like, this is great. We want the strategy. We want the consulting, all of these things. Whereas others would say, you know what, we've had a really rough time with this and we've been burnt so many times. Can we just take a really slowly approach? Yeah. And so being very flexible, understanding, and being able to work with people with where they're at, rather than, sort of pushing them into a system of, we feel this is the right way, 100% better way to do it. So that definitely evolved. But even in terms of our own systems and procedures, of finding ways to do things that were more streamlined, that made a lot more sense, and clearly educated our clients as we were going along, because we felt that the more that we could empower them with knowledge about what was happening, how to understand it, how to make better decisions, then everybody wins, rather than trying to say, well, these are all the things that are behind the curtain and there's a lot there that you just won't understand. I think people can understand so much more than they're giving credit for if you just take the time to meet them where they're at and understand that everybody has different learning styles. So to give you an example, quite often in marketing agency land, people will send you like a monthly report about something and you get pages and pages of numbers and all of these things. We actually found that our clients just didn't understand for the most part, or they didn't like it. Some wanted more numbers, some not at all. And so I would just record a video for them instead and say, hey, here's the things that you need to know. This is the good stuff. This is where we're going. And delivering information in a way that really worked for them so that they didn't feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I actually don't think I've come across someone doing that, because if I think of all the agencies I've either worked in or with, I've never had a video report. I've only ever had, like you say, the pages and reams of, really, you probably skip to the back page and see what's the impact, but you don't read all the detail. Yeah, and I've probably been one of the people producing those reports at times. So
Yeah.
I think that's right.
You know, whether it's reports or pretty much anything that you do with clients, the thing that should drive it is the why. You know, why do you make decisions? Why are we going in this direction? And a page full of numbers for most people, that doesn't tell them why. Unless you're a data scientist, that's not the case. So we have to have more human conversations in what we do all of the time.
Definitely. You talk about obviously a passion working with female founders. When you started out, did you have other female founders that you looked up to or that were a bit of a mentor or guide for you starting out?
Honestly, no, I didn't see them. And that was part of what made me so, let's call it tenacious rather than stubborn. You know, I'd worked in some corporate environments that were very, very male dominated. And, you know, even in the 90s where it was always expected that, well, you were the woman in the office and so therefore you're going to make morning tea for everybody. So that sort of didn't really sit very well with me. And I knew that it was going to be a real challenge. When I did start out going, I'm going to set up a business, then the attitude was it needs to be a very female-centric business. So it's fine if you go and work in fashion or design or something, people will accept that. But I've found that the more I have moved into running businesses that are in more of a male-centric avenue, so particularly marketing agencies and now in technology and AI, I'll say the struggle is real. You do get pushback from people who are just like, well, you're a girl, what would you know? And I do find that that is incredibly frustrating. And one of the biggest reasons that I want to support more female founders and that we have a real passion, not just in our business for working with them as clients, but even hiring women where possible to do the jobs that, you know, you might have 100 male candidates for and only a couple of women. I always really want to talk to the women because I know how much harder we've had to work to get to where we are.
And I suppose that's a lot of the passion behind starting this female founder series, is to give female founders more visibility, because it is a case of there are amazing female founders out there doing incredibly well with their businesses, but they're not very visible to the public eye. And we want to encourage more women to start their business, but not a small hobby, an actual profitable business that can change their lifestyle and give them financial independence.
Exactly. And I think we also need to really focus together as a group on helping to change a lot of that conversation publicly, that, you know, we'll see in PR and articles, everybody lauds people like Janine Ellis, for example, who started an amazing business, and I think Naomi Simpson's one of the others that will always sort of be pushed out. But what we find at that grassroots level of friends and family is that so many of achievements of female founders are diminished and seen as, well, this is just a hobby, or you must have a rich husband, or, you know, these sorts of things, which is really disheartening, and it pushes you further forward because we have to get those conversations happening and help people really see what we're doing so that our children, and particularly our daughters, see what is possible for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a couple of final questions, really on, I suppose, balancing lifestyle. I suppose I've been through burnout and learned from that lesson. But how do you, I suppose, maintain as the business owner a balance in your lifestyle, but also, your own well-being, mental and physical, I guess?
Yeah, it's always a challenge. I'm not someone who's naturally inclined to like go for runs or go to the gym or anything like that. So I've really had to work on building that kind of activity into my days. The only way that I've been able to make myself do it is to literally just say, I will go to the gym. I don't have to necessarily do a program, but mostly I'll get on the treadmill and I'm watching YouTube and trying to learn something else so I can distract my body. But the other big thing is that flexibility. So having that time to do what I need to do with my family means that there are some days that I'll work a couple of hours, some days I'll work longer. And if I try to put a rigid schedule around that, life just doesn't work out.
Mm.
So I try and be more flexible with it. My favorite hobby would be taking naps. So I have learned that when I'm really feeling it, to just be okay with that and to not beat myself up, to make sure that things are under control. I've got a great co-founder, I've got a great team. And if I need to go and take half an hour or an hour here or there to just be able to continue and do the rest of the day, that's okay. And it's not quitting or being soft. It's actually taking that time to allow your brain to do what it needs to do to continue to perform. And I think that mental struggle that we sometimes have of, I've got to do everything. I have to be infallible. I have to be there for my staff. I have to be there for my family. I have to do all of these things. Also means that we have to be there for ourselves, or we can't do that to the best of our ability. So I don't have any really clear, sort of rigid schedule of working out or meditation or anything like that.
Yeah.
As lovely as that sounds, I will tell you that I once got kicked out of yoga for snoring too loudly. So I have great intentions, but I'm also prepared to experiment on that side.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so finally, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, well, you can find me on all of the socials as Candice DeVille, or you can reach out to me through copilotcrew.com.au.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today and really valuable insight, and wishing you the best of luck with that new launch, and
Thanks, Shelley.
hope to hear more about it.
Yes, we're very excited. Thanks so much, Shelley.
Thank you.